Luciano Pavarotti, Cavaliere di Gran Croce OMRI was an Italian operatic tenor who also crossed over into popular music, eventually becoming one of the most commercially successful tenors of all time. He made numerous recordings of complete operas and individual arias, gaining worldwide fame for the brilliance and beauty of his tonia especially into the upper register and eventually established himself as one of the finest tenors of the 20th century. As one of the three tenors, Pavarotti became well known for his televised concerts and media appearances. From the beginning of his professional career as a tenor in 1961 in Italy to his final performance of Nessun Dorma at the 2006 Winter Olympics in Turin, Pavarotti was at his best in bel canto operas, pre-Aida Verdi roles, and Puccini works such as La Bohème, Tosca, and Madama Butterfly. Pavarotti was also noted for his charity work on behalf of refugees and the Red Cross, amongst others. He died from pancreatic cancer on September 6, 2007. Earlier life and musical training. Luciano Pavarotti was born in 1935 on the outskirts of Modena in northern Italy, the son of Fernando Pavarotti, a baker and amateur tenor, and Adele Venturi, a cigar factory worker. Although he spoke fondly of his childhood, the family had little money. Its 4 members were crowded into a 2-room apartment. According to Pavarotti, his father had a fine tenor voice but rejected the possibility of a singing career because of nervousness. World War II forced the family out of the city in 1943. For the following year they rented a single room from a farmer in the neighboring countryside, where the young Pavarotti developed an interest in farming. After abandoning the dream of becoming a football goalkeeper, Pavarotti spent 7 years in vocal training. Pavarotti's earliest musical influences were his father's recordings, most of them featuring the popular tenors of the day Beniamino Gigli, Giovanni Martinelli, Tito Schipa, and Enrico Caruso. Pavarotti's favorite tenor and idol was Giuseppe Di Stefano, and he was also deeply influenced by Mario Lanza, saying, "In my teens I used to go to Mario Lanza movies and then come home and imitate him in the mirror." At around the age of 9 he began singing with his father in a small local church choir. After what appears to have been a normal childhood with a typical interest in sports in Pavarotti's case football above all, he graduated from the Scuola Magistrale and faced the dilemma of a career choice. He was interested in pursuing a career as a professional football goalkeeper, but his mother convinced him to train as a teacher. He subsequently taught in an elementary school for 2 years but finally allowed his interest in music to win out. Recognizing the risk involved, his father gave his consent only reluctantly. Pavarotti began the serious study of music in 1954 at the age of 19 with Arrigo Pola, a respected teacher and professional tenor in Modena who offered to teach him without remuneration. According to conductor Richard Benninge, Pavarotti never learned to read music. In 1955, he experienced his first singing success when he was a member of the Chorale Rossini, a male voice choir from Modena that also included his father, which won first prize at the International Eisteddfod in Llangollen, Wales. He later said that this was the most important experience of his life, and that it inspired him to become a professional singer. At about this time Pavarotti first met Adua Veroni. They married in 1961. When his teacher Arrigo Pola moved to Japan, Pavarotti became a student of Ettore Campigliani, who at the time was also teaching Pavarotti's childhood friend, Mirellini, whose mother worked with Luciano's mother in the cigar factory. Like Pavarotti, he was destined to operatic greatness. They were to share the stage many times and make memorable recordings together. During his years of musical study, Pavarotti held part-time jobs in order to sustain himself first as an elementary school teacher and then as an insurance salesman. The first 6 years of study resulted in only a few recitals, all in small towns and without pay. When a nodule developed on his vocal cords, causing a disastrous concert in Ferrara, he decided to give up singing. Pavarotti attributed his immediate improvement to the psychological release connected with this decision. Whatever the reason, the nodule not only disappeared but, as he related in his autobiography, everything I had learned came together with my natural voice to make the sound I had been struggling so hard to achieve. Career. 1960s are Euro 1970s, Pavarotti began his career as a tenor in smaller regional Italian opera houses, making his debut as Rodolfo in La Bohème at the Teatro Municipale in Reggio Emilia in April 1961. He made his first international appearance in La Traviata in Belgrade, Yugoslavia. Very early in his career, on February 23, 1963, he debuted at the Vienna State Opera in the same role. In March and April 1963 Vienna saw Pavarotti again as Rodolfo and as Duca di Mantova in Rigoletto. The same year saw his first concert outside Italy when he sang in Dundalk, Ireland for the St. Cecilia's Gramophone Society, and his Royal Opera House debut, where he replaced an indisposed Giuseppe Di Stefano as Rodolfo. While generally successful, Pavarotti's early roles did not immediately propel him into the stardom that he would later enjoy. An early coup involved his connection with Joan Sutherland, who in 1963 had sought a young tenor taller than herself to take along on her tour to Australia. With his commanding physical presence, Pavarotti proved ideal. The two sang some 40 performances over 2 months, and Pavarotti later credited Sutherland for the breathing technique that would sustain him over his career. Pavarotti made his American DA copyright but with the Greater Miami Opera in February 1965, singing in Donizetti's Lucia di Lammermoor opposite Joan Sutherland on the stage of the Miami-Dade County Auditorium in Miami. The tenor scheduled to perform that night became ill with no understudy. As Sutherland was traveling with him on tour, she recommended the young Pavarotti as he was well acquainted with the role. Shortly after, on April 28, Pavarotti made his La Scala debut in the revival of the famous Franco Zeffirelli production of La Bohème, with his childhood friend Mirellini singing Mimi and Herbert von Karajan conducting. Karajan had requested the singer's engagement. After an extended Australian tour, he returned to La Scala, where he added Tibaldo from I Capuletti e I Montecchi to his repertoire on March 26, 1966, with Giacomo Aragal as Romeo. His first appearance as Tonio in Donizetti's La Fildura copyright judgment took place at the Royal Opera House, Covent Garden, on June 2 of that year. It was his performances of this role that would earn him the title of King of the High Cs. He scored another major triumph in Rome on November 20, 1969 when he sang in I Lombardy opposite Renato Scotto. This was recorded on a private label and widely distributed, as were various recordings of his I Capuletti e I Montecchi, usually with Aragal. Early commercial recordings included a recital of Donizetti and Verdi arias, as well as a complete L'Alcide d'Amour with Sutherland. His major breakthrough in the United States came on February 17, 1972, in a production of La Fildura copyright judgment at New York's Metropolitan Opera, in which he drove the crowd into a frenzy with his 9 effortless high Cs in the signature aria. He achieved a record 17 curtain calls. Pavarotti sang his international recital DA copyright but at William Jewell College in Liberty, Missouri, on February 1, 1973, as part of the college's fine arts program, now known as the Harriman Jewell Series. Perspiring due to nerves and a lingering cold, the tenor clutched a handkerchief throughout the DA copyright but the prop became a signature part of his solo performances. He began to give frequent television performances, starting with his performances as Rodolfo in the first Live from the Met telecast in March 1977, which attracted one of the largest audiences ever for a televised opera. He won many Grammy Awards and platinum and gold discs for his performances. In addition to the previously listed titles, his La Favorite with Firenze Cossuto and his I Puritani with Sutherland stand out. In 1976, Pavarotti debuted at the Salzburg Festival, appearing in a solo recital on July 31, accompanied by pianist Leone Maggiora. Pavarotti returned to the festival in 1978 with a recital and as the Italian singer in De Rose and Cavaliere in 1983 with Idomeneo, and both in 1985 and 1988 with solo recitals. In 1979, he was profiled in a cover story in the weekly magazine Time. That same year saw Pavarotti's return to the Vienna State Opera after an absence of 14 years. With Herbert von Karajan conducting, Pavarotti sang Manrico in Il Trovatore. In 1978, He appeared in a solo recital on Live from Lincoln Center. 1980s–1990s, at the beginning of the 1980s, he set up the Pavarotti International Voice Competition for young singers, performing with the winners in 1982 in excerpts of La Bohème and La Lycée d'Amour. The second competition, in 1986, staged excerpts of La Bohème and Un ballo in mascara. To celebrate the 25th anniversary of his career, he brought the winners of the competition to Italy for gala performances of La Bohème in Modena and Genoa, and then to China where they staged performances of La Bohème in Beijing. To conclude the visit, Pavarotti performed the inaugural concert in the Great Hall of the People before 10,000 people, receiving a standing ovation for 9 effortless high Cs. The third competition in 1989 again staged performances of La Lycée d'Amour and Un ballo in mascara. The winners of the fifth competition accompanied Pavarotti in performances in Philadelphia in 1997. In the mid-1980s, Pavarotti returned to 2 opera houses that had provided him with important breakthroughs, the Vienna State Opera and La Scala. Vienna saw Pavarotti as Rodolfo in La Bohème with Carlos Kleiber conducting, and again Mirellini was Mimi. As Nemorino in La Lycée d'Amour. As Radams in Aida conducted by Lauren Morzil. As Rodolfo in Louisa Miller. And as Gustavo in Un ballo in mascara conducted by Claudio Abbado. In 1996, Pavarotti appeared for the last time at the Sart's Opera in Andrea Carr copyright Naya. In 1985, Pavarotti sang Radams at La Scala opposite Maria Chiara in a Luca Ronconi production conducted by Morzil, recorded on video. His performance of the aria Celeste Aida received a 2-minute ovation on the opening night. He was reunited with Mirellini for the San Francisco Opera production of La Bohème in 1988, also recorded on video. In 1992, La Scala saw Pavarotti in a new Zeffirelli production of Don Carlos, conducted by Riccardo Muti. Pavarotti's performance was heavily criticized by some observers and booed by parts of the audience. Pavarotti became even better known throughout the world in 1990 when his rendition of the aria Nessun dorma from Giacomo Puccini's Turandot was taken as the theme song of BBC's TV coverage of the 1990 FIFA World Cup in Italy. The aria achieved pop status and remained his trademark song. This was followed by the hugely successful Three Tenors concert, held on the eve of the World Cup final at the ancient baths of Caracolla in Rome with fellow tenors Placido Domingo and José Copyright Carreras and conductor Zubin Mehta, which became the biggest-selling classical record of all time. A highlight of the concert, in which Pavarotti ammed up a famous portion of Di Capuo's O Sol Mio, and was mimicked by Domingo and Carreras to the delight of the audience, became one of the most memorable moments in contemporary operatic history. Throughout the 1990s, Pavarotti appeared in many well-attended outdoor concerts, including his televised concert in London's Hyde Park, which drew a record attendance of 150,000. In June 1993, more than 500,000 listeners gathered for his free performance on the Great Lawn of New York's Central Park, while millions more around the world watched on television. The following September, in the shadow of the Eiffel Tower in Paris, he sang for an estimated crowd of 300,000. Following on from the original 1990 concert, the Three Tenors concerts were held during the Football World Cups, in Los Angeles in 1994, in Paris in 1998, and in Yokohama in 2002. In 1995, Pavarotti's friends, the singer Lara St. Paul and her husband showman Pier Quinto Karaoke, who had produced and organized Pavarotti's 1990 FIFA World Cup celebration concert at the Palazzo Sardi in Milan, produced and wrote the television documentary The Best Is Yet to Come, an extensive biography about the life of Pavarotti. Lara St. Paul was the interviewer for the documentary with Pavarotti, who spoke candidly about his life and career. Pavarotti's rise to stardom was not without occasional difficulties, however. He earned a reputation as the king of cancellations by frequently backing out of performances, and his unreliable nature led to poor relationships with some opera houses. This was brought into focus in 1989 when Ardis Kraenik of the Lyric Opera of Chicago severed the house's 15-year relationship with the tenor. Over an 8-year period, Pavarotti had cancelled 26 out of 41 scheduled appearances at the Lyric, and the decisive move by Croce to ban him for life was well noted throughout the opera world, after the performer walked away from a season premiere less than 2 weeks before rehearsals began, saying pain from a sciatic nerve required 2 months of treatment. On December 12, 1998, he became the first opera singer to perform on Saturday Night Live, singing alongside Vanessa L. Williams. He also sang with U2 in the band's 1995 song Miss Sarajevo, and with Mercedes Sosa in a big concert at the Boca Juniors Arena La Bombonera in Buenos Aires, Argentina, in 1999. In 1998, Pavarotti was presented with the Grammy Legend Award. 2000s. In 2004, one of Pavarotti's former managers, Herbert Breslin, published a book, The King and I, seen by many as bitter and sensationalistic. It is critical of the singer's acting, his inability to read music well and learn parts, and his personal conduct, although acknowledging their success together. In an interview in 2005 with Jeremy Paxman on the BBC, Pavarotti rejected the allegation that he could not read music, although he acknowledged he did not read orchestral scores. He received an enormous number of awards and honors, including Kennedy Center honors in 2001. He also holds 2 Guinness World Records, one for receiving the most curtain calls and another for the best-selling classical album. In late 2003, he released his final compilation A Euro, and his first and only crossover album, Ti Adoro. Most of the 13 songs were written and produced by Michel Santons, who had already helped produce the Pavarotti and Friends concerts between 1998 and 2000. The tenor described the album as a wedding gift to Nicoletta Mantovani. That same year he was made a Commander of Monaco's Order of Cultural Merit. Pavarotti began his farewell tour in 2004, at the age of 69, performing one last time in old and new locations, after more than 4 decades on the stage. On March 13, 2004, Pavarotti gave his last performance in an opera at the New York Metropolitan Opera, for which he received a long-standing ovation for his role as the painter Mario Cavaradossi in Giacomo Puccini's Tosca. On December 1, 2004, he announced a 40-city farewell tour. Pavarotti and his manager, Terry Robson, commissioned impresario Harvey Goldsmith to produce the worldwide farewell tour. His last full-scale performance was at the end of a 2-month Australasian tour in Taiwan in December 2005. In March 2005, Pavarotti underwent neck surgery to repair 2 vertebrae. In early 2006, he underwent further back surgery and contracted an infection while in the hospital in New York, forcing cancellation of concerts in the US, Canada, and the UK. On February 10, 2006, Pavarotti sang Nessun Dorma at the 2006 Winter Olympics opening ceremony in Turin, Italy, at his final performance. In the last act of the opening ceremony, his performance received the longest and loudest ovation of the night from the international crowd. Leone Maggiora, who directed the performance, revealed in his 2008 memoirs, Pavarotti Visto da Vicino, that the performance was pre-recorded weeks earlier. The orchestra pretended to play for the audience, I pretended to conduct and Luciano pretended to sing. The effect was wonderful, he wrote. Pavarotti's manager, Terry Robson, said that the tenor had turned the Winter Olympic Committee's invitation down several times because it would have been impossible to sing late at night in the sub-zero conditions of Turin in February. The committee eventually persuaded him to take part by pre-recording the song. He received the America Award in memory of the Italy-USA Foundation in 2013. Other work, film and television. Pavarotti's one venture into film, a romantic comedy called Yes, Giorgio, was roundly panned by the critics. He can be seen to better advantage in Jean-Pierre Ponel's adaptation of Rigoletto for television, released that same year, or in his more than 20 live opera performances taped for television between 1978 and 1994, most of them with the Metropolitan Opera, and most available on DVD. Humanitarianism. Pavarotti annually hosted the Pavarotti and Friends charity concerts in his hometown of Modena in Italy, joining with singers from all parts of the music industry, including Andrea Bocelli, John Bon Jovi, Bryan Adams, Bono, James Brown, Mariah Carey, Eric Clapton, Sheryl Crow, Copyright Line Dion, Anastacia, Elton John, Deep Purple, Meat Loaf, Queen, George Michael, Sting and the Spice Girls, to raise money for several UN causes. Concerts were held for war child and victims of war and civil unrest in Bosnia, Guatemala, Kosovo and Iraq. After the war in Bosnia, he financed and established the Pavarotti Music Center in the southern city of Mostar to offer Bosnia's artists the opportunity to develop their skills. For these contributions, the city of Sarajevo named him an honorary citizen in 2006. He performed at benefit concerts to raise money for victims of tragedies such as the Spitag earthquake that killed 25,000 people in northern Armenia in December 1988, and sang Gounod's Ave Maria with legendary French pop music star and ethnic Armenian Charles Aznavour. He was a close friend of Diana, Princess of Wales. They raised money for the elimination of landmines worldwide. He was invited to sing at her funeral service, but declined to sing, as he felt he could not sing well with his grief in his throat. Nonetheless, he attended the service. In 1998, he was appointed the United Nations Messenger of Peace, using his fame to raise awareness of UN issues, including the Millennium Development Goals, HIV/AIDS, child rights, urban slums and poverty. In 1999, Pavarotti performed a charity benefit concert in Beirut, to mark Lebanon's re-emergence on the world stage after a brutal 15-year civil war. The largest concert held in Beirut since the end of the war, it was attended by 20,000 people who traveled from countries as distant as Saudi Arabia and Bulgaria. In 2001, Pavarotti received the Nansen Medal from the UN High Commission for Refugees for his efforts raising money on behalf of refugees worldwide. Through benefit concerts and volunteer work, he has raised more than any other individual. Other honors he received include the Freedom of London Award, and the Red Cross Award for Services to Humanity, for his work in raising money for that organization, and the 1998 MusiCares Person of the Year, given to humanitarian heroes by the National Academy of Recording Arts and Sciences. He was a national patron of Delta Omicron, an international professional music fraternity. Death. While undertaking an international farewell tour, Pavarotti was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer in July 2006. The tenor fought back against the implications of this diagnosis, undergoing major abdominal surgery and making plans for the resumption and conclusion of his singing commitments, but he died at his home in Modena on September 6, 2007. Within hours of his death, his manager, Terry Robson, noted in an email statement, "The maestro fought a long, tough battle against the pancreatic cancer which eventually took his life." In fitting with the approach that characterized his life and work, he remained positive until finally succumbing to the last stages of his illness. Pavarotti's funeral was held in Modena Cathedral. The then Prime Minister Romano Prodi and Kofi Annan attended. The Volkstricolori, the aerobatic demonstration team of the Italian Air Force, flew overhead, leaving green-white-red smoke trails. After a funeral procession through the center of Modena, Pavarotti's coffin was taken the final 10 kilometers to Monteil Ringon, a village part of Castelnuovo Ringon, and was entombed in the Pavarotti family crypt. The funeral, in its entirety, was also telecast live on CNN. The Vienna State Opera and the Salzburg Festival Hall flew black flags in mourning. Tributes were published by many opera houses, such as London's Royal Opera House. The Italian football giant Juventus FC, of which Pavarotti was a lifelong fan, was represented at the funeral and posted a farewell message on its website which said, "Ciao Luciano," black and white heart referring to the team's famous striped shirt. Personal life. On December 13, 2003, he married his former personal assistant, Nicoletta Mantovani, with whom he already had a daughter, Alice. A second child, Riccardo, did not survive because of complications at the time of birth in January 2003. Pavarotti is also survived by 3 other daughters by his first wife Adua, to whom he was married for 34 years, Lorenza, Christina, and Juliana. At the time of his death, he had 1 granddaughter. Settlement of estate. His first will was opened the day after his death. a second will, within the same month of September. He left an estate outside his native Modena, a villa in Pesaro, a flat in Monte Carlo, and 3 flats in New York City. Pavarotti's widow's lawyers, Giorgio Bernini and Anna Maria Bernini, and manager Terry Robson announced on June 30, 2008 that his family amicably settled his estate €300 million. Pavarotti drafted 2 wills before his death. One divided his assets by Italian law, giving half to his second wife, Nicoletta Mantovani, and half to his 4 daughters. The second gave his U.S. holdings to Mantovani. The judge confirmed the compromise by the end of July 2008. However, a Pesaro public prosecutor, Massimo Di Patria, investigated allegations that Pavarotti was not of sound mind when he signed the will. Pavarotti's estate has been settled fairly, a lawyer for Mantovani said in statements after reports of a dispute between her and his 3 daughters from his first marriage. Selected discography. In addition to his very large discography of opera performances, Pavarotti also made many classical crossover and pop recordings, the Pavarotti and Friends series of concerts and, for Decca, a series of studio recital albums, first 6 albums of opera arias and then, from 1979, 6 albums of Italian song. Studio recital albums, favorite Italian arias, arias from La Bohème, Tosca and Rigoletto. Orchestra of the Royal Opera House, Covent Garden Edward Downes Decca Records 1966, arias by Verdi and Donizetti, arias from Louisa Miller, One Due for Scary, Un ballo in Maschera, Macbeth, Lucia di Lammermoor, Il Duca da Euro unregistered trademark Alba Louisiana Favorita and Don Sebastiano. Tenor arias from Italian opera, arias from Guglielmo Tell, I Puritani, Il Trovatore, Liliziana, La Bohème, Mephistopheles, Don Pasquale, La Gioconda and Giuseppe Pietraszit, Maristola. Luciano Pavarotti tenor with Arlene Auger soprano. Leone Maggiore Wiener Opernicista and Choir. Ambrosian Singers New Philharmonia Orchestra Nicola Rosigno 1971, the world's favorite tenor arias Tosca, Carmen, Aida, Faust, Pagliacci, Martha. Royal Philharmonic Orchestra. Wiener Volksopera Orchestra. Leone Maggiore. New Philharmonia Orchestra Richard Benninge 1973, Pavarotti in concert, arias and songs by Bononcini, Handel, Alessandro Scarlatti, Bellini, Tosti, Respighi, Rossini. Orchestra del Teatro Comunale di Bologna. Richard Benninge 1973, O Holy Night, songs and carols by Adam, Stradella, Frank, Mercadante, Schubert, Bach, Bizet, Berlioz, Pietro Jon, a Louis Mnicha. Wandsworth Schoolboys Choir. London Voices. National Philharmonic Orchestra, Kurt Herbert Adler 1976, O Sol Mio, Favorite Neapolitan Songs 13 songs by Eduardo Di Capua, O Sol Mio Francesco Paolo Tosti, Avicula, Enrico Canio, O Sodato Namorato, Hit, Salvatore Gambardella, O Marineri Lo, Traditional, Fenesta Vassia, Tosti, Amaricchia, Ernesto de Curtis, Torno Sariento, Gaetano Errico Panino, Pecca. Vincenzo Donabal, O Paese Dio Sol, Ernesto Tagliaferri, Piscatori Pusilico, Curtis, Ithaca Nancayan, Capua, Maria, Mari, Luigi Denza, Funicula. Orchestra del Teatro Comunale di Bologna Anton Guadagno National Philharmonic Orchestra at Giansalo Caramello 1979, Verismo, arias from Fedora, Mephistopheles, Adriana Lacovra, Iris, L'Africaine, La Fancilla del West, Mornan Lesort, Andrea Carr Copyright Naya. National Philharmonic Orchestra Oliviero de Fabrici 1979, Mattinata, 14 songs by Caldara, formerly Atribe. Pergolesi, probably by Vincenzo Ciampi, to Giorni Sunchainina, Bellini, Tommaso Giordani, Rossini, Gluck, Tosti, Donizetti, Leoncavallo, Beethoven and Francesco Durante. Philharmonia Orchestra Piero Gamba National Philharmonic Orchestra. Antonio Tannini 1983, Mama. songs by Ser Andrea Bixio, Ernesto de Curtis, Arturo Buzzi-Peccia, Stanislao Gastolden, Ser Cesarini, A. Walter Kramer, Carlo Innocenzi, Giovanni Danzi, Eldu di Lazzaro, Vincenzo de Crescenzo, Domenico Martuzzi, Anilo Califano, Colombino Arona. Arranged and conducted by Henry Mancini. 1984, Passion, 12 songs by Ernesto Tagliaferri, Paolo Tosti, It Pasquale Mario Costa, Teodoro Cotto, It, Ivemero Nardella, Rodolfo Fulvo, De Curtis, Di Capua, E. A. Mario, Gaetano Lama and Salvatore Cardillo. Orchestra del Teatro Comunale di Bologna. Giansalo Caramello. 1985, Volare, 16 songs by Domenico Modigno, Luigi Denza, Ser Andrea Bixio, Gabriele Sabella, Giovanni Danzi, Michael John Bonagura, Bidudo Mascaroni, Ernesto de Curtis, Ermenegildo Ruction, Pietro Mascafni, Guido Maria Ferrilli. Arranged and conducted by Henry Mancini. 1987, Teodoro, songs by Romano Musumara, Carlo Milli, Ornella d'Urbano, Michel Santons, Andrea Bellantani, Daniel Vletic, Veris Gianetti, Nino Rota, Elsa Moranti, Bidudo Benato, Hans Zimmer, Gavin Greenaway, Jeffrey Pisetto, Lucio Dalla. Royal Philharmonic Orchestra, Orchestra di Roma. Bulgarian Symphony Orchestra. Romano Musumara, Giansalo Caramello, 2000. See also, best-selling music artists, notes and references. External links, official website, Luciano Pavarotti at the Internet Movie Database, Discography, Luciano Pavarotti Discography at Music Brilliance, The Times Obituary, Review of the King and I at thege.com.au, The Pavarotti Story, Decca Records, Pavarotti Video Biography by National Italian-American Foundation NIAF, History of the Tenor, Euro Sound Clips and Narration, Funeral Mass of Luciano Pavarotti on YouTube.